California Dreaming is brought to you by Blueberry. You know, there is a little bit more to making a podcast than just talking into a mic and hitting publish. You need more than that. And I'm talking about a reliable hosting service so your time can be spent working on your show. You also want accurate download numbers, you want to see the audience that you're reaching, and you're going to want a webpage that is simple and easy to work with. That's why I choose Blueberry. With its simple media hosting and fully integrated WordPress website, it can't get any easier. So if you host a show or if you're thinking about starting one, visit www.orbitaljigsaw.com/dream to give Blueberry a try for a month for free. Blueberry's support team will be right there every step of the way to help you migrate over so you won't lose any of your subscribers in the process. And if you're brand new to this, they can get your new show up and running. And with a month for free to try it out using promo code DREAM, what have you got to lose? There are a number of ways that you can support California Dreaming. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can recommend us in podcast and true crime fan groups. And you can leave the show a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you listen to the show on. And if you would like to go a little above and beyond, you can support the show on our Patreon. You can gain access to at least one exclusive episode per month, and there are currently more than 50 episodes that you can binge. And we are currently in the middle of a very intriguing series on Patreon. So for just $1, you can get in on that too. In addition, there are about 8 premium episodes available for supporters at the $5 and above tiers. If you are unable to sign up for a monthly subscription, you can help us with a one-time donation to the show through our PayPal using our email, californiapod@gmail.com. Every little bit helps in keeping California Dreaming moving forward, and with all of your support, it's enabled us to remain ad-free. Please stay tuned at the end of this episode to hear a promo from a podcast that I think you will enjoy called The Evidence of a Crime, hosted by Fern Olivia. She is soft-spoken and she has a lovely accent to boot. I would also like to thank Rachel Y. in our Facebook discussion group for posting about this story and recommending it to be told on our show. I had been working on a different story over this past weekend, but it was turning into one of those things where I was just starting to kind of draw blanks, and there just wasn't anything enabling me to flow just right. So for this particular case, it's pretty straightforward. There isn't very much leading into the story. There isn't very much leading out of the story. All it really boils down to is choices. I asked this question in the Facebook discussion group. If you found out you only had a couple of months to live, what are some things that you'd want to do before you go? Now, if you didn't answer the question on the post and you don't want to hear everybody else's answers, go ahead and skip to about the 22:30 time marker in the show to get on with the rest of it. Ian C. said that he would like to find his biological mother and father. Logan M. said that she would like to swim in the ocean with dolphins. Teresa A. said she would like to disappear from life on an island somewhere and live her best life doing what she wants to do. Alyssa L. said she would like to go skydiving and go in a submarine because those are 2 of her biggest recreational fears. Dave M. said he would like to visit New York City. Kate M. said she would like to travel as much as possible with her husband, preferably internationally. Donna J. said she would like to write her memoir that she always jokes about and also spend as much time with her family and her best friend's family. Anna Leah said that she would like to be with her family as much as possible and sew until she cannot sew anymore. Melinda C. said she would like to finish her cookbook that she started writing for her 3 kids and to also ride a horse on a beach. Erin H. said she would want to get photos of herself in one place for her nieces and nephews to have, to have a party with the people that she loves, all the beach days, eat good food, and have good sex. Veronica M. said she would like to see the Grand Canyon, pen her autobiography, plan her own funeral, and fake her own death while she's at it to see how her family eulogizes her while she hides in the back in disguise. Karen R. said she'd screw her kids out of her inheritance and she's just kidding. And honestly, sounds like something my mom would say, but she would be serious about it, but also too cheap to actually follow through. Lisa Beans said she would be going to shows, trying to meet her favorite musicians, bust up in Al Green's church asking for prayers, rush the stage at a Queen show as she's always wanted to do and have had opportunities to, but just didn't want to go to jail because if she's dying, it doesn't matter then. She'll die happy with her memories. Marquette E. said it would be all about family for her, filling those precious moments with her soulmate husband, her adult children, her siblings, and her 6 adorable grandchildren. Loads of love, deep conversations about what they'd all aspire to do with their lives, and lots of laughter. Christine C. said she'd spend time with her family. Abigail A. said doing exactly what she's doing now, working her dream job in the most beautiful place on earth. And if you don't know Abigail in our group, she's now a deputy in Colorado. She was on our show once when we talked about the update on the Ghost Ship Fire episode. And next, Samantha D. said she would live it up on her credit cards and travel around the world. But right now we can't travel anywhere anyways. So I told her this is hypothetical and we can pretend that this is a non-pandemic world. So she said, if that's the case, then she's going from 0 credit to all the way up maxed out. First to Japan, South Africa, Australia, and all the places that she has not been to yet in Europe. Elia C. said she would like to visit Las Vegas and Hawaii. Leslie P. also wanted to spend her last days in Hawaii as well. Caitlin P. said she would quit her job, travel across the United States, which is on her bucket list, see as many of the states as possible, and it would be mostly a solo trip because it would be a time of self-reflection, but she would also make sure to say her goodbyes, probably in letters to read after she passes away. And Narissa was contemplating all the things that she would eat. Stephen H. said that he would find a way to set up a life insurance policy that may set his family up for a while. Then he'd go and lose himself in drugs and alcohol, then make his way to Europe and die in Rome. Leanna P. said she would sit and hold her babies and have her family and dogs all around her. The thought of that makes her want to cry. And same here, thinking about not seeing my daughter and my dogs anymore, I'd be very sad. Kirani L. said that she would ask for the forgiveness of someone that she should have a long time ago. Kari M. said that she would travel and have the biggest party with everyone that she loves, put her toes in the sand and water of the Pacific Ocean, and get to the redwood forests of Humboldt County. Mary G. said she would travel the country, all the great places that she would like to see, Alaska and the Canadian Rockies. Then for the last month, she would gather with her family together at a beach somewhere and just sit by the ocean and share memories, and eat lots of food and drink lots of wine. Lindsay F. said that she would make sure her kids would know that she would be fine. She would go on a family vacation, make lots of videos of herself talking to her kids at every stage of their lives, make birthday videos, wedding videos, when they become parents, etc. She would have loved to have had that from her mom after she died. Tyler, Dice Tyler, you know who you are. He said the sky's the limit. What he wouldn't do is the better question. Anthony M. said he would buy a sniper rifle and make sure the world was a better place before he left it. Now, we get where you're going with that, but listen. If you want a story about some vigilante justice, then go listen to the recent episode of Mysterious Circumstances called The Alaskan Avenger. It is an attempt to make things right with the world there, so I'll just leave that at that. Sandra C. said she would travel. Vanessa H. said she would make videos and send them time delayed to haunt her husband and his future life, like any good wife would. She would wear her "I have 2 months to live and all I got was this lousy t-shirt" shirt. Then she would buy a lot of heroin and go out in a cloudy haze. Vicky S. said she would go to Europe with her daughter to see the lands from where her people came. Crystal P. said that she would want to spend as much time with her kids, husband, and other loved ones before it happened, to take lots of pictures and probably upload some YouTube videos for her kids of her reading some of their favorite stories and showing them how to recreate family recipes. Rachel D. said she would write a book. Nellie B. said she would want to go visit every last one of her friends and family and then go to Thailand. Sean N. said he would like to travel and spend time with his family. He's a car guy, so he'd love to travel to Germany, get behind the wheel of a Lamborghini Centenario. I guess that's how you say that. I'm not sure. I don't speak car. On the Autobahn and just floor it, which he would enjoy because he's an adrenaline junkie. And if he happened to die in a crash, know that he died with a smile on his face. Phyllis S. said she would get her affairs in order and make sure her finances covered her final expenses, tell her daughter and her grandson every day how much she loves them. Then if she had any money left, she would take them to all the places that they've always said that they wanted to visit. Shannon H. said that she would make memories with her kids, write letters and film videos, help give them things to remember her by. Heather S. said she would go to India to see the Taj Mahal. Brian W. said he would try to make peace with some of the people who have wronged him. Janie W. said she would take her family on a retreat away from the real world and rent a large cottage or two in the wilderness and live there for a month or two with them. Avoid the internet, just play Scrabble, some real puzzles, and drink some wine. Mar W. said that she would take her son and her husband on a world tour, take thousands of family selfies, and leave recordings of her love to her 2 guys so they never forget how much that she loves them. Jorge G. said that he would travel to every continent. He would binge watch every movie that's on his bucket list and spend the final months with his family and friends and have a pre-funeral kind of a celebration of his life. Antonia L. said she's kind of doing this now. She's been playing guitar for a long time, but has always been too shy to play in front of or with other people, so she plays by herself. In her community in Florida, she's now the lead female vocalist in a ragtag sort of a band. She's been taking care of her disabled husband for 8 years and started to feel kind of trapped. The music has gotten her out of her shell, and now she's having the time of her life. Right now, having this me time, and that's her advice. Always make that me time, no matter what else is going on in your life. It took her too long to figure that out, and it has also helped her out physically because she quit smoking because she wanted to sing, and mentally because it got her out of her shell and enabled her to share her music. Her other dream is to visit her roots in Sicily. So, Antonio here has shared a nugget of wisdom with all of us. Don't wait until you know your life is ending to live your dreams. Lynn B. said she would write a memoir with her family history for her children so that wouldn't be lost. Jen T. said she would like to meet up with me and the other admins of the group. And if you don't know, my admins of the Facebook group have become pretty good friends, and we gossip about you guys listening all the time. I'm just kidding. We hardly talk about the group because we don't have very many problems, which is very nice. She also said that she would like to swim with dolphins. Rich M. said that he would like to drop peyote again. He hopes on a fine spring Colorado day with afternoon showers while watching the river. And Susan W. wants to join you, Rich. Rebecca Jane, who's also one of my admins, wants to fly to California along with her closest dreamers and have the best fun ever, spend days with many puppies, tell her family and friends how much she loves them and how incredible they've made her life, write life journals for her children and Jay, everything that they need to know about how to have the best life, eat all the food, and make Keanu Reeves give her a really good hug. And she's crying now. Stephanie K says that she wants to travel to Singapore. Angie F said that she would record all of her thoughts and memories to leave to her young son and have as many adventures with him and seeing the places all around the world that they could. Shelly M says she likes the idea of leaving videos and to address events in her family that they will likely experience after she's gone, making videos of her cooking her special recipes, fill the freezer with banana bread for her grandkids, get a house at the beach for her and her loved ones to play, to go with her grandkids to Disneyland, play lots of password with her adult loved ones, sing and dance, and she's already embroidered tons of dish towels for her grandkids to have when they have their own homes. She's already got baby quilts made for her future great-grandchildren. She'd plant flowers and vegetables for her family to harvest when she's gone, and she would take lots of photos together. Carrie Ann W. said she would spend as much time as possible with her boys, as well as her siblings and their kids, then maybe travel everywhere and anywhere. Leslie A. said she would publicly name the people who stabbed her dad because they never faced charges and they changed hers and her family's life forever. Carol L. said nothing that she doesn't already do, hang out with the kids and husband and dogs, and try to be on social media less. Sydney P. said to visit the people important to her and to say goodbye. Lisa A. said she would spend time with her children and grandchildren. She has a wonderful husband, a beautiful dog, and the perfect job at a dog sanctuary. What more could a person want in life? Sarah M. has said she would write her memoir and to take time to say goodbye to everyone that she would be leaving. She'd just want to finish up everything and die in peace. Kathy B. said she would make sure that the last check that she ever writes bounces. Roy S. said he would do what he's done before, get an apartment in Florence, Italy, and spend each day walking around and revisiting Renaissance artworks in the museums and churches. Connie B. said she would visit her daughter who lives out of state. Cynthia D. said she would go see her grandma in Norway, give away her stuff to whoever wants it and get rid of the rest so her family doesn't have to, and to cash out all of her money and pay for her nieces and nephews to go to school. Anna W. said she would do the things that she always wanted to do, travel, to see some amazing places around the world, and to see the people that she's come to know here in the group as well in real life, to taste things she'd never dared to taste before like escargot or whatever crazy fried meat street food in the deepest back alleys of Thailand. But mostly she'd want to spend time with her loved ones. If that's what she wants to do in the end, she might want to be alone, but she doubts it. Kate M. said she would take her kids on a trip around the world. Byron W. said he would visit everywhere he had a great childhood memory. Shannon S. said she would move back with her mom and dad. She would want to spend every second she had left with them. Amy B. said she would spend as much time as she could with her kids, focus on them, try to give them all the best life advice she possibly could. Amanda W. said she would spend as much time with her family, both chosen and blood, travel as much as possible, laugh every single day, and eat all the good stuff. Sarah Rose said she would spend every day internet-free, spend as much time in nature, by the oceans and the mountains, and she would completely and wholeheartedly open her heart unconditionally towards the people who love her. Thomas M. said he would visit the Grand Canyon and see some family. He doesn't want to do too much except watch the sunrises and sunsets and drink. Christina S. said she would move back home to Ontario, Canada. She lives in Oklahoma currently and does not fit in. She also wants to travel with her mom and her husband one more time. She wants to take a river cruise through Europe, one that starts in Germany and ends in Russia. And she would like to foster one last dog before she goes. Natalie W. said she would like to travel to Japan, but also she recently found out that her dad was kind of a player and she has 7 half-siblings she found on DNA sites. She would want to find all the possible siblings that she has around the world and have a get-together. Her dad has previously lived in Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Mexico, so she's pretty sure that there's more. Amanda S. said she would travel to many places that she always wanted to go with her little girl. Since she has been diagnosed with cancer, she doesn't know her future, but she's also broke due to medical bills and fighting DJ's case. In that case, she's lucky these days to make it to the grocery store. And Dreamers, this is Amanda, sister of DJ Ficky. We covered his story not too long ago. You may or may not have known that she has been diagnosed with cancer and has been battling that for some time. Recently, DJ's cause of death was amended from suicide to undetermined, but the powers that be still won't budge on prosecuting this case. So that's still in limbo. Mary Virginia said that she would travel, and that was the last of the answers on the post. However, I found Mary G had amended her answer in a different post. One of our admins, Lisa J, posted a Florida Woman article that read, Florida woman has been accused of driving a motorized shopping cart through a Target while drinking wine from the bottle and eating sushi and cinnamon rolls. I'm not completely convinced that this story is true because firstly, cinnamon is spelled wrong, and secondly, you can see the very top of this woman's booking photo placard that says Atlanta, Georgia, PD. So either this was actually a thing that didn't happen in Florida, or this woman just happened to have a super photogenic mugshot and it was used for a Florida woman story. Fact or fiction, truth or urban legend, this woman is all the goals, and Mary G said she's changed her mind, that she's doing this if she only had a few months to live, run wild in Target. And girl, let me know. I will join you. I want to thank all of you who took the time to give some funny and some meaningful answers as well. Of course, there is a reason why I asked, because our story today evolves around a mother who was faced with this very question. Given the knowledge so suddenly and so out of the blue that her life was indeed finite, she was going to have to come face to face with some tough decisions. Knowing that her time left on this earth was limited, there was something that she needed to confront. The reality of what she feared she might possibly be leaving behind. In this 160th episode of California Dreaming, the tale of a mother's choice. This story was featured in a Los Angeles Times article written by columnist Frank Cheong, which was published on May 14th, 2017. And that really is just about all the media coverage there is out there about this story. The backdrop is the city of Rosemead, California, which is located in the western part of the San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles County. The city does have a large Asian population, and the family at the center of today's story are immigrants from Laos, which is nestled between Vietnam and Thailand, north of Cambodia. Leah Hang, who went by the name Ava, grew up in Laos, and sometime during her teen years, during the 80s, her family, along with the family of her childhood best friend, Ping Chong, moved to Hong Kong. There wasn't too much information as to why it was that both families decided to relocate together. I suppose perhaps they were very close, or it was something that they decided would be easier to do together in order to have the support of each other's families. maybe it isn't too unusual in some cultures, especially if the objective is a search for a better life. So Ping did speak to the Los Angeles Times, and she said that their apartments were small, but they'd manage to take turns having dinner parties in each other's homes on alternating weekends during their time in Hong Kong. Ping described her friend Ava as not only being smart, but beautiful, with many goals and aspirations for her future. Eva had been awarded a scholarship to attend school in Japan where she would study graphic design. She graduated from high school in 1986, and this was a period when women did not typically pursue higher education. So it was quite an accomplishment for Ava to have been awarded this scholarship and the opportunity to further her studies, which was a testament to her drive and her ambition. By 1992, Eva was finished with her studies, and her next move would take her to the United States to get married and to start a family of her own. Eva would go on to marry a man named Peter Hang, and together they would make their dreams of living and thriving in America come true. They settled on opening their own business, a print shop, which was located in the neighboring city of Alhambra on its bustling downtown Main Street. It's a place with eclectic dining choices, Chinese restaurants, Indian, Japanese, Mexican, Middle Eastern, Thai, Malaysian, Italian, and of course, good old American dining. There are also coffee houses and juice bars, and during times where there isn't a global pandemic, it sounds like a really adventurous place with an assortment of international options. Aside from dining, there's also shopping, clothing stores, home goods, and boutiques, entertainment, not only live music at some of the local establishments, but you can also catch a movie. Well, maybe not right now, at the Edward Cinema. And outside of dining and entertainment, there's also an auto row, as well as various commercial facilities and establishments. And back in the early 90s, the Hangs opened Quality Printing and Graphics. And with business going well, Peter and Ava were able to purchase a home in a quiet gated community in Rosemead. And in 1998, they added to their family when they welcomed a baby boy that they named George. He would be the couple's only child. And for whatever reasons, however it came to be, coincidence, fate, luck perhaps, childhood friend Ping also ended up in California, close enough for the friends' children to also become childhood friends, as Ping also had a son, also born in 1998. Kismet, as it may have been. Their life's journey had brought them back together, and the two could not be happier about it. Then one day in 2012, the Hang's American dream started to come crashing down. Eva's husband, Peter, found out that he had cancer. It was in his chest and in his brain. It was aggressive, it was advanced, it was terminal, and he died the same year. There is no good time for a son to lose his father, but there is something to be said, something that seems a little bit more tragic when he loses his dad so early in life, as George was only 14 at the time and was immersed in his very first year of high school. According to Ping, she immediately saw a shift in her friend's son. His father's death hit the boy hard, and it was so painfully obvious that he was not dealing well with it. She knew because she witnessed the changes firsthand, because her boy was his friend. She could see that he'd become withdrawn, and her son's friendship with him was deteriorating, and it would never be the same. What Ping may not have known at the time, because it's not a thing that is openly talked about in the Asian culture, is that sometime after Peter died, George was diagnosed with schizophrenia, so around the age of 14 or 15. I can speak to this being a very taboo thing to talk about because of my aunt, one of my mom's sisters, they're Vietnamese, she experienced an inexplicable shift in her personality also at around the age of 14. It wasn't until she immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in 1985, shortly after that she too was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and my mom has basically been taking care of her ever since, if you can call it that, but because she's embarrassed of her and avoids taking her places. In recent years, my aunt's behavior has deteriorated, and she's been lashing out violently at my mom. My mom's had her hospitalized several times in the last year for 2 weeks at a time. And my mom has complained to me about it on numerous occasions, and I've told her, send her to live with me. I'll upgrade to a 2-bedroom, but she won't do it. Because, well, this is my opinion, but there is a financial motive to remain my aunt's primary caregiver. Honestly, if you've heard me talk about my wacky mom in the past, then you know she is very toxic, and living with her can make anybody go mad. So imagine already struggling with mental illness on top of that. I don't think getting away from my mom would be a miracle cure for my aunt, but I do think it would be 1,000 times better, and my aunt has never been violent towards anybody else except my mom. So there's that. I guess all of this is to say is that I can speak somewhat to the mental health issues and cultural issues going on here in the story. So I'm kind of in my lane here. I'm just kidding. I'd talk about this case regardless. According to the Los Angeles Times, there are issues when it comes to having meaningful conversations about mental illness in nearly every culture around the world, but studies have been conducted on the subject and have found that when it comes to Asian Americans of all racial groups, they are the least likely to seek out treatment for mental illness. Now, as for my story, what I've shared with you, you have to keep in mind that even though my mom and her family are from Vietnam, and it's quite likely that my aunt's mental illness may not have been addressed or treated by mental health services available in the United States, can't say for sure, but my dad was American, and it was a priority for him when he helped my mom's entire family immigrate here. And by entire family, I mean her 5 brothers and sisters, as well as a handful of cousins. That they came here with a clear plan to finish up their education if they needed to. They went to adult school, they learned English, so they would be able to find work and become productive Americans. However, this would not be a possibility for my aunt. There was something deeply wrong with her, and she was going to need professional help. Eventually, she was diagnosed, placed on medications, and my parents committed to being responsible for her and taking care of her, which is still going on to this day. I don't know if the trend of mental illness still being so taboo amongst Asian communities is that pervasive. I believe it is, but I can't speak to everybody. The experience has been somewhat different for me because my parents got help for my aunt. They reached out. Because you can get help. And for many, the cost of mental health care is covered by the state of California. Public health access is sometimes challenging, but the help is out there. But the problem has to first be acknowledged by the families of those struggling with mental illness. Now, for Ava, she did go out and sought treatment for her son. She, at the very least, understood the importance of that, taking those steps. But beyond that, another facet of coping with a loved one who's been diagnosed with mental illness is the ability to open up about it to those who are in their system of support. Other family members, trusted friends, not even necessarily mental health professionals. But what the Times article described as an important piece of informal therapy, those who are the closest to you, people that you can lean on for support whenever you need it. It's really important. And that's a thing that's very much lacking when it comes to my mom and the rest of her siblings, who all for the most part have been very detached and fractured from one another. As a matter of fact, in July, this past July, my aunt was giving my mom more problems than usual. So one of her other sisters suggested that they take turns, a month at a time, taking care of my aunt. So in the beginning of July, my mom sent my aunt over to her brother's house. She also gave him $900, which is the income that my aunt gets from Social Security. And the very next day, he sent her back and sent back the $900 to my mom and said he can't do it. And that was the end of that. My mom is getting older and she's also disabled, so my daughter staying back in California with her, to an extent, is one of several reasons why she didn't move out here to Nevada with me. Anyway, talking about George's diagnosis was difficult for Ava. There were moments when she opened up about it a little, but quickly would move away from the topic. And those who work in the mental health field have said that remaining hush-hush about the topic can cause toxicity in the relationships, particularly if that relationship is a parent whose child is struggling with mental illness. As for Ping, she happened to work at a pharmacy, but not the usual pharmacy that we would normally go to with prescriptions from our doctors. Rather, she worked at a dedicated Chinese pharmacy, so in one of the few instances when Ava reached out to her, she asked Ping what her thoughts were about the medications that George had been prescribed by his physician. But Ping, she didn't really want to pry too much into her friend's business or George's medical issues, so she just looked at it really quickly, or at least she appeared to look at it, and she did not read anything that was on the label. She handed it back to Ava and suggested it was best for her to follow the instructions that the doctor had provided, and from there, she moved on to talking about something else. And according to the Times article, there was another time when Ava asked her friend to come with her to an appointment that George had, but Ping was really resistant. She felt as though it was not her place to even be there, but she went anyway, that she stayed far enough away from the conversation so she would be out of earshot. She just didn't think it was a thing that was appropriate. So Ava was, in fact, reaching out for some help in dealing with her son's diagnosis, but the adhering to the cultural taboos, her friend attempted to stay out of it as much as possible, while still trying to be as supportive as she could within the boundaries of what she felt was proper. Ping would say that she and Ava were close as friends could be, but she could not or would not allow herself, or she was incapable of communicating with her about these topics, no matter how deep their friendship ran. She just couldn't do it. The Times article read, quote, "Both were raised to believe the proper way to respect another family's pain was to give them privacy and spare them the social embarrassment of public suffering." If you recall, we recently touched on this theme back in episodes 145 and 146 when we discussed the murder of Michelle Lee, perpetrated by her high school friend Giselle Esteban. If you recall, the elder members of Michelle's family had wished to deal with her disappearance privately, while the younger generation of family members, Michelle's siblings and cousins, wanted to inundate the media with her name and picture, as it had taken several months to eventually find her body. And if I remember correctly, the family had also been locked in on what they wanted to believe was the truth about where Michelle was, that it caused a rift in their relationship with law enforcement, so much so, in some ways, inhibited the investigation for a period of time. So the idea of having respect, suffering in private because doing so publicly is embarrassing, is an idea that we've seen before within the Asian community. So as it stood, as far as Ping was concerned, any involvement on her part in Ava's struggles with her son and his diagnosis of schizophrenia would only make things worse. Which I get why the cultural upbringing would dictate that as such, but it was so backwards when you actually say it out loud. I can't help but wonder, when all is said and done, knowing the way that this story is going to play out, I wonder if there would have been anything Ping would have done differently, or if sticking by the old world tradition was indeed the only correct answer. Ping kept her distance and kept quiet while Ava struggled to work through this with her son and his mental illness diagnosis on her own. By early 2015, Ping really began to take notice that something was going awry in Ava's home. Things were being broken inexplicably. An iPad, a small ceramic dish in the bathroom, a doorknob that seemed to have been forcibly smashed off. Ava said that those things were accidentally broken, but Ping wasn't so sure that she was believing her friend. Even outside, there had been a vegetable garden that George himself had planted, which Ping had helped him tend to. That garden looked as though it had been damaged deliberately on more than one occasion, so clearly this was no accidental occurrence. And then there was something else that Ping found somewhat off-putting inside her friend's home. Ping's son and George were in the same history class at the time, and many months earlier they had an assignment that involved World War II. But George still had all of the materials related to Adolf Hitler, books and other things still strewn about the table, as well as the swastika that he had drawn himself. Because the project had been done with so long ago, Ping wondered why all this stuff was still there, as if he was still working on it. According to Ping, Ava never really spoke badly about George, ever. That is, until one day when she received George's report card for the semester, and he had earned straight Fs. It was the first time Ping had ever heard Ava say anything negative about George, and it wasn't in English. She used a term in Cantonese, and I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced, but it's seozai. It's 2 words spelled Seoizai. I put it into Google Translate and nothing came up, so I guess it's really super old school. At best, it meant that George was naughty. At worst, it means that he's a wicked child. In that moment, Ping began to feel that if there was something really terrible going on with George, that Ava was pretty aware of it. Then, in the summer of 2015, Ava herself received devastating news, eerily similar to the news that her late husband had received 3 years earlier. She too had terminal cancer, and she was given an equally grim prognosis. She had 4 months to live. That same day, Eva went to submit the application to purchase a handgun. The waiting period in California was and is 10 days. She next asked Ping to take charge of her most important paperwork. While Ping did not want to do it because to do so would necessitate her having to face the reality that her friend was dying. But in Eva's desperation, she raised her voice at her friend, which was the first time Ping had ever heard Ava shout. She slammed her hand down on the table between them and asked her to please do as she wished. Ping relented and took her papers. She understood that the weight of what would become of George when Ava passed away was an incredibly heavy burden on her. He was only 17 years old at this time, very young to be essentially orphaned. There were also the concerns about his care and well-being, considering him having been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He is obviously going to need help, and Ava knew that. But what I'm not sure of is if Ping really knew or understood the extent of what was going on with George, because she had been so reluctant to. Oh, I don't want to say that she was reluctant to help, but she was attempting to respect her friend's private struggles, This was the way that they were raised. She did not want to breach that. Whatever you and I may feel about that, whether we agree or disagree was the right thing or wrong thing to do, I guess we just have to understand that Ping was doing what she believed to be the right thing. What Ping really had no idea of was how dire Ava's situation had become, at least in her own mind. Ava had become so consumed with what was going to happen to George when she was gone that he would be left to navigate this world while struggling with not only his mental illness, but now the loss of both of his parents. It was weighing on Ava, day in and day out. To understand where Ava's deepest worries stemmed from, we need to go back in time a little bit, back to 2012, the year that George lost his father, Peter. But there was something else going on that year across the United States. Even though it wasn't exactly a new thing, but it was the mass shootings that were happening that year that George's father died. They seemed to be having a deep effect on George. While there were a number of mass shootings earlier in the year, starting with 4 people that were killed, plus the shooter in Norcross, Georgia on February 21st, 3 people that were killed on February 27th at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that city right. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. 1 person was killed, plus the shooter, on March 8th at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 7 people were killed at Oikos University in Oakland, California on April 2nd. 3 people were killed on an Easter weekend shooting spree in Tulsa, Oklahoma on April 6th. 5 people plus the shooter were killed on May 30th at a coffee house in Seattle, Washington. And then there was a shooting that would dominate the news for months to come. The July 20th shooting at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado that killed 12 and injured 58. And then 6 people were killed plus the shooter on August 5th at a Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. 2 were killed plus the shooter on August 13th in College Station, Texas, a couple of blocks away from Texas A&M. Then there were 6 killed plus the shooter on September 27th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The shooter was being fired from his job when he brandished a weapon and started firing. 3 people were killed plus the shooter on October 21st in Brookfield, Wisconsin. This was a domestic violence incident carried out at the shooter's estranged wife's place of work. 2 were killed plus the shooter in a mall in Happy Valley, Oregon on December 11th. And then one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, 5th to be exact, behind the 2017 shooting in Las Vegas, Nevada that killed 59, the 2016 Orlando, Florida shooting that killed 50, the 2007 Virginia Tech University shooting that killed 32, the 2017 Sutherland Springs, Texas shooting that killed 26. 5th is the Newtown, Connecticut shooting that took place on December 14th, 2012, which also killed 26 plus the shooter. There was one more mass shooting in 2012 that killed 3 plus the shooter on December 21st in Frankston Township, Pennsylvania. It goes without saying that 2012, in a year that George Hang suffered the devastating loss of his father, the impact of these mass shootings, especially the 2 that overshadowed most others on the news and in the media, Aurora, Colorado, and Newtown, Connecticut. It was all over the news every time Ava turned on her TV. 2013 had its share of mass shootings as well. 5 that were killed in South Valley, New Mexico on January 19th. And then, back in California, we discussed the killing spree and subsequent manhunt for disgraced LAPD officer Christopher Dorner, which we covered way back in episode 8. That took place over a 9-day period in February, which killed 5 people. On June 7th, 6 people were killed in Santa Monica, California. On June 26th, 7 people were killed in Hialeah, Florida. On August 5th, 3 people were killed in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. On September 16th, 13 people were killed in what is known as the Washington, D.C. Navy Yard shooting. And on November 1st, one person was killed at what is known as the LAX airport shooting. And then in 2014, as George was basically flunking out of school and no longer interacting with any of his friends, on May 23rd, 6 people were killed in what is known as the Isla Vista killing spree. Eva was seeing that her son was, for a lack of a better term, fascinated with these shootings. And just before she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, given only 4 months to live, prompting her to submit her paperwork to purchase a gun, George became obsessed with a new mass shooter, a white supremacist who on June 17, 2015, while sitting in on a prayer service at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, opened fire, killing 9 people, in an attempt that he would later say to start a race war. Eva's concerns grew as she watched her son become completely engrossed in the acts of these mass killers. Having seen her son spiral after his father's death, his mental illness, his violent outbursts at home, and now his fixation on mass killers, when she found out that she was going to be dead in a matter of months, she found herself in a place where she was going to have to make a choice. And it's a choice that nobody would want to make, especially a mother. According to the Times article, it explicitly says that experts will say that mental illness does not contribute significantly to violence in the United States, and that individuals who have been diagnosed with some serious mental illness conditions are perfectly capable of achieving the same things in life as anybody else. It's when the mental illness is misunderstood, that is when perhaps someone like Ava might be prone to jump to conclusions or become exceedingly alarmed and panicked. While I agree with that, I find it to be generally true. I feel like Ava here has found herself in an extremely desperate situation, primarily due to the fact that her time was limited. She was going to die, and the question that burdened her, the one that probably felt like the weight of the world, that she was carrying it on her shoulders, was what was to become of her child, who she could see was extremely troubled. Who would be left to help him, to guide him, to love him? This desperation was all-encompassing. It literally consumed her. And her friend Ping really did not feel it right to be her confidant, at least not in this situation. But in the years in between George's dad's death and Ava's own diagnosis, if we were to look at the mass shootings that were in the news most prominently, Aurora, Colorado, Newtown, Connecticut, Isla Vista, California, and Charleston, South Carolina, the common thread between at least some of those killers was that there seemed to have been some level of mental illness going on with each of them. As for the Charleston, South Carolina killer, I'm not sure about that, but the Colorado shooter in the movie theater, I've heard reports over time that in court and on camera, he seems to have this stare that goes right through you, which can be construed as there being some kind of mental illness going on, while other reports have come out that the killer is otherwise pretty lucid. The inference here being that perhaps he's faking it on camera. I don't know for sure. To me, his stare, the look in his eyes has always been troubling, but I'm not an expert. The Newtown, Connecticut Sandy Hook mass shooter, he also had that 1,000-mile stare, at least in some of the pictures that I've seen of him. He didn't seem to be in full possession of all of his faculties either. His mom seemed to know that he had, at the very least, some difficulties in social situations, if I remember correctly. I think he may have been on the autism spectrum. Perhaps at least that idea was entertained. Maybe Asperger's. There was something going on with him, and his mom had stayed home in order to take care of him up until he killed her, followed by all of those children and administrators at the school. He had been seen by a number of specialists throughout his childhood, but after 2008, no further mental health services were ever sought for him. And as for the Isla Vista mass killer, his mental health had been sort of a hot button issue when we covered him. He's believed to have been on the spectrum as well. His father had come forward to defend his son, saying that he wasn't evil, he was mentally ill. But other experts have weighed in and said it was more likely that he had narcissistic personality disorder, as well as a lot of anger towards women. But anyway, at this point, in some of these cases, mental illness is pointed to as being a main factor in the motivation behind these mass killings that were carried out, mass killings that George was consumed with. Whether we believe that to be true or not is not relevant for us, at least at this case. What is relevant is whether or not George's mom, Eva, believed mental illness was the motivating factor here, or at least the perpetuating factor. She has to be seeing what these young men are doing and looking at their histories, looking at their blank stares on the news and wondering if she's seeing her son in them. When she looked at George, when he looked back at her, was his stare going right past her? Did she see in his eyes what she saw in the others? These others were murdering masses of people randomly with impunity. When she was gone, there would be nobody to stand in George's way, especially when he turned 18. Then he'd truly be left to his own devices. You have to think that Ava is connecting the dots here. Even though experts will say mental illness is not a major contributing factor when it comes to violence, the media is not really doing its part to send that message out there. It's actually been quite the opposite, especially in these high-profile cases from 2012 through 2014. The media looks for a story, looks for a history, looks for a reason, looks for a motive. And if any of these cases you get someone who took a rando class with the killer 5 years earlier, and if they were to say something like, oh yeah, there was something definitely off about him, well, there you go. The media perpetuating the idea that these men were mentally ill long before. And the resulting mass shooting isn't surprising because they seemed off back in middle school PE. So the running theme is mental illness becomes even more stigmatized. Does mental illness play a factor in acts of violence? Perhaps it does, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that 99.9% of those who are being treated with whatever it is that they've sought help for by mental health professionals are living perfectly productive, non-violent lives. These people who commit these murders, they're the exception. In one conversation Ping recalled having with Eva, they were discussing these mass shootings, and Eva posed a question that gets asked many times over and over again, but always too late. Why hadn't anyone taken any actions to try and stop these young men from carrying out these mass killings? There had to be signs, red flags, troubling things that must have been going on leading up to it. The idea to carry out these acts of violence were not born in a day. It had to be something that was some time in the making. Eva must have felt this to be true because she was living with it. The signs, the red flags, it was there all around her, plain as day. With every broken doorknob, every broken soap dish, and every demolished vegetable garden, right there in front of her eyes, she can see and feel the unraveling of her boy. The question now before her was this: is she going to go to her death thinking that someday people are going to wonder the same things about her that they think of the mothers and fathers and loved ones of these killers? Why didn't anybody do something? Eva was not going to be comfortable leaving this life without facing that question for herself. The 10-day waiting period for Ava's gun was winding down, and I'm pretty sure that you listening can already guess where this story is going. Just a couple of days before she would be able to pick up her gun, Ava took her son out to one of his favorite Thai restaurants for some pad Thai. And then, on Monday, July 27th, 2015, Ava got the call that she could come by and pick up her gun. And it was on that same day that Ava and George checked into a motel located in the same city in which they had built their American dream. I looked the place up and I scrolled through some pictures of the motel, and I mean, it's got a 3.6 star rating. Kinda looks like an Asian-style Motel 6, sort of. I was hoping I'd be able to find some details about why Ava told George the reason for their stay at the motel was, like if she were having their home fumigated or something, but I couldn't find those answers. I don't know what that conversation was like. But sometime after George drifted off to sleep that evening, Ava got her gun. She took aim and fired 2 shots into her son's chest, killing him. He was 17. Ava put her gun down, got into bed next to her dead child, and lay next to him for hours. She ran her fingers through his hair as the bed slowly absorbed his blood. Ava would later tell investigators that that was how she needed to say goodbye to him. Then, sometime afterwards, Ping's cell phone rang. She looked at her phone and saw that it was an incoming call from George's phone. She answered it, surprised to find Ava on the other line. She immediately started questioning her friend. What is this? What is going on? Is there something the matter? Where are you guys? Where is your son? Ava answered with 4 chilling words. I sent him away. The investigation into George's death began the following morning, Tuesday, July 28th, when a call came into 911 at approximately 10:10 in the morning from a woman reporting that she had shot her 17-year-old son. In speaking to some of the other guests at the motel, they reported hearing what sounded like gunshots sometime around 5 a.m., but nobody was alarmed enough to call it in to report it. When first responders arrived at the motel, they discovered George lying in the bed in the room that he and his mom had checked into the day before. He was pronounced dead at the scene shortly after paramedics arrived. The handgun was also found inside the room. Eva had called, immediately admitted to what she'd done, and wanted to turn herself in. Eva, who was 49 years old at the time that she killed George, was taken into custody and held on $2 million bail, charged with first-degree murder. She was subsequently arraigned on August 12th. The lead detective on the case, in speaking to the Times, said, quote, "She believed she was doing the right thing. She didn't want others to suffer." Eva had explained to detectives during questioning that it was her belief that not only was her son potentially a danger to himself, but more alarming to her was the fact that she believed he was a serious danger to others in the community. She knew him to have been fixated on a number of mass shooters over the past 3 years since his father had died. In that time, he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, he was under the care of his doctor, and on prescription medications. She explained that he played several video games that were very graphic and violent, and she felt as though he was on his way to becoming a mass shooter himself. With his father gone and her having been diagnosed with terminal cancer, Eva felt her only option was to make sure that George would never become a danger to anyone. She also shared with detectives on the case that the reason she didn't shoot herself was because it was her desire to face the punishment and the consequences of her own actions in taking George's life. Ping did visit Eva in jail just a couple of weeks after her arrest, but it was clear Eva was deeply ashamed of what she'd done. While Ping wanted her friend to tell her in person, in her own words, to explain herself, Eva would not faze Ping and requested that she take all the pictures that they ever took together and set them on fire, to forget her, for everyone to forget her. If Eva shared anything about how or why she came to this decision, Ping did not say. And Eva's time in jail would not be for very long. As she was in there, she knew, everybody knew, that she wasn't waiting to go on trial. She was waiting to die. The cancer continued to ravage her body, spreading into her eye. Eventually, she lost vision, and then she lost mobility. The cancer caused her to become paralyzed. In just about 4 months, the amount of time that she was given to live, a judge ruled that Ava's condition, the cancer, it was dire enough for her to be allowed to be given compassionate release, at which time she was moved to a local hospital where she could be kept comfortable and friends could visit. I don't know if there were multiple friends, but I do know Ping visited once. She brought her dying friend a bouquet of flowers along with a string of prayer beads. And she had this to say to her friend in a whisper: "You are not a prisoner anymore. You are not a criminal anymore. Nothing that happened before matters." Shortly after Ping went home, around 4 p.m., that same afternoon that she had said those final words to her friend, Eva passed away in her hospital room, surrounded by no one. According to the Times, there are other choices out there for parents who are in similar situations as Eva, the one that she had found herself in. If a parent has a terminal illness and they are concerned about who is going to be able to take care of their child who's been diagnosed with mental illness or is exhibiting troubling behaviors, there are options, steps that can be taken before the parent dies. Even though George was about to turn 18, Ava could have tried to go through the court system, explain to a judge the situation, and have him found unable to take care of his own personal affairs, and at that point, a court could place him under a conservatorship. She may have been able to speak to law enforcement or to his doctor or other professionals about her concerns, about the state of George's mental health, and explain her fears and concerns that she believed him to be an imminent threat to himself as well as the community, at which point he may have been taken into custody. He would have been evaluated, and it is possible he could have been kept under the care of a mental health professional over the long term. But the reasons this was likely never going to be a thing that Eva would have sought out all goes back to our discussion about mental illness, the Asian culture, and the responsibilities of how to deal with George belonging to the mother and the mother alone and nobody else. But then, I don't know if Eva had an understanding of the resources that could have been available to her. If anyone had ever talked to her about it, or she ever tried to research other options. Or if she simply decided straight away that the way she chose was the only option. There is very little out there available to read online about the Hang family. Aside from Frank Xiang's article and a short blurb about the homicide in the Los Angeles Times, there is nothing more to be found. Sword and Scale wrote about the story on their blog back in 2017, but it is basically a synopsis of the same LA Times article that I've referenced here. And the Sword and Scale article has one view, and that view is probably me. However, on the homicide report on George's death, there were 7 comments that were left between August 4th, so a little more than a week after his death, through November 9th, 2015. I wanted to share those with you and discuss some of my thoughts. The first commenter was making some speculations about the case, as there was not very much in the way of details being released early on. The commenter wrote, "I wonder what led to this. a mother killing her 17-year-old son while he slept in a hotel. Were these people homeless? Now, no, we know that in the years that the Hangs were in the United States, they were able to provide for themselves and their son a comfortable life. They were not destitute, at least not financially. The next comment read, I know this mother. She has terminal cancer. I guess the doctors told her she didn't have much time to live, so she wanted to take her son with her. Very tragic. The next comment was along the same vein. Really? The justification is she has terminal cancer and wanted to take him with her? But she didn't take him with her. She shot him. She put a gun to his chest and pulled the trigger of the gun and sat there all night with his body. This wasn't the act of a loving mother. It was the act of a selfish woman who should go to hell and rot there. She did not have the right to take her son's life. Who knows, maybe he could have been the link that finds the cure for the type of cancer, or made a meaningful contribution to society now that none of us will know what he could have been. Wow, this woman is so caught up in her own life that the life of her son didn't matter. Okay, dreamers, now this is where we may try to figure out how we feel about Eva killing her son the way she did. Obviously, the person who wrote this comment, at the time that this was written, it's known that she had terminal cancer because it's mentioned in the previous comment. But there was not yet an explanation as to why Eva would make such a drastic decision. We've gone over it in as much detail as we possibly can know or ever know, that she had a real fear that after she died that her son would eventually go on to emulate the mass shooters that he had seen in the news stories that we were all inundated with in the ensuing years following his father's death. It was said that he didn't cope well with losing his dad, so who knows what could have happened or how he may have reacted to his mother's death. And I wonder if she even told him that she had that diagnosis. I mean, the decision to get the gun, or at least get the process started, it all happened on the same day that she received her diagnosis. So it wasn't like she took all that much time to ponder what she was going to do when she knew for sure that her days were numbered. So I guess what I'm asking, or I'm wondering, is does it make a difference that we know the reasons behind Ava's choice to kill her son? Or is it how the commenter had said? She didn't have the right to do it. She didn't know what the future had in store for him. He never got to live to his potential. And that Ava was so caught up in her own life that her son's life didn't matter to her. I honestly don't know how I feel about this one, because we don't know what the future held for George. We will never be able to answer that question. Mom decided that the chances of what she foresaw happening to her son when she was gone was justification enough for the choice that she had made. But did she have the right? To answer that question, I'm gonna have to say no. I don't believe it was her place to play God here. I understand her way of thinking, but I just can't say that I'm okay with this one. I feel for her, though. To me, it appeared she really agonized over what she was planning to do, and once it was done, she expressed that she was deeply ashamed. And I mean, this is really walking a fine line here, but we've heard this saying, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Eva did take full responsibility for murdering George. She said that she didn't shoot herself because she wanted to face the consequences of her actions. But I also believe that it is possible that her own religious beliefs may have played into that too. You know, the committing of suicide and whatnot. But she did take responsibility. She turned herself in. She fessed up to what she'd done, and she went to jail. But perhaps because she was terminally ill, she knew her time in jail was going to be limited, So it was neither here nor there for her. She wasn't going to go to trial. She wasn't going to be in prison for years and years because she was really already condemned. So does taking responsibility and facing the consequences and what seemed to be all the punishment that she was putting her own self through, does that lessen the impact of her actions? And the one thing I'm not so sure I agree with is the last sentence here in this comment, where it said that Eva was so caught up in her own life that the life of her son didn't matter. Is there any truth to that? I mean, look, how many times have we seen one mass shooter after another just come seemingly out of nowhere and open fire on a group of people, firing his weapon? And I say his weapon because most of the time these mass shooters are men, not all, but most. And as we start learning about the shooter and what was going on in his life at the time leading up to it, we hear about the warning signs, the strange behaviors, the red flags, everything we've talked about. Then we have the media, the general public, the whole country, and sometimes the whole world asking, if there were all these alarm bells going off, why didn't someone do something? I ruminated over that in the episode on the 1984 mass shooting at the McDonald's in San Ysidro, California. I questioned why the killer's wife, when he said he was going hunting for humans, why she didn't immediately call 911. There were some warning signs leading up to what her husband ultimately did. Though some listeners did say, who is going to take that seriously? What he had said about hunting humans. She could have been scared or in fear for her own life. And I've said the same thing about the Sandy Hook shooter. His mom knew that her son was deeply troubled, yet she gifted him a gun as a birthday present or something like that. I've said in these situations, if we, the average citizen, can't depend on those closest to these mass shooters to be wary of the warning signs that something may be off or something disastrous is about to go down, then who will? I've said the family and the loved ones of these murderers are our first line of defense when it comes to preventing these mass shootings from happening. But then, here in this story, we have Ava, who did just that to the extreme. She foreshadowed disaster and decided to neutralize the perceived threat. But then again, the woman didn't have a crystal ball. She made an assumption. She was going to be dead before her son finished high school. She believed in much of what had been perpetuated by the media, that violent video games and mental illness begets violence. And that's not something I've bought into because, again, I say there are plenty of people out there who play violent video games and plenty of people who have been diagnosed with mental illness that are completely not violent. But did she see something in him where she just believed the combination of everything that was swirling around in George's life, in addition to the video games and the mental illness, the fixation on the mass shooters, the interest in Adolf Hitler, the untimely death of his father, and soon the untimely death of his mother? Was this the perfect storm for a mass shooter in the making? Did she potentially save lives by ending his? It's just one of those questions we frustratingly can't know the answer to. So I don't know. I've been running this through my head over and over again, trying to figure out how I feel about what Ava did. And I really hate to give you guys listening one of those generic answer, non-answers like, I don't like what she did, but I understand it, because I don't even know if I really do. I got upset when I read an article that a woman wanted her dog euthanized to be buried with her when she died. I thought that was way wrong, and I just couldn't get on board with being okay with that. And I can't get past how wrong it was for Ava to have shot George as he slept, no matter why she did it. And this is one of the very first cases I read about where I felt a tinge of sympathy from the homicide detective assigned to George's case. I mean, he still had to follow the law, but his words felt very somber, like he understood the decision on a deeper level than just the law. As the last commenter had said, maybe George would have gone on to find a cure for cancer. But there's also the chance that he may have gone to end up ranked on the list of deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. But we won't ever know because his mother made sure he'd never reach that crossroad. The last 4 comments were from people who knew George personally. One read, George was one of my history partners about a year ago. Once we had talked about family life for this activity that we had, and he was constantly telling me how his personal life wasn't well, and that there were some people that didn't care for him at all. He was a very kind person, always willing to smile at everyone. Gone too soon. Very, very tragic. May he rest in peace. This comment got me thinking that maybe George and his mom were butting heads at home. We've heard stories about the strictness of Asian parents and the pressures that they put on their kids. There have been podcasts with this exact theme. Maybe George did feel like his life at home was falling apart. Maybe he felt as though his mom didn't care about him. It seemed like she did, but really, it only matters if he felt it. And if he was failing all of his classes and she called him a wicked child, she was likely growing more and more disappointed in him. Academics is a big deal in the Asian culture. Not that it isn't among other people. We just know that generally the reputation is there that Asian parents push their kids hard to achieve the highest grades possible in school. Maybe George's most honest feelings were those he expressed to his peers, like this history partner with whom he opened up to about his home life. The next comment read, George was a kind person. I met him in school after he got out of talking to the school psychologist. And he looked sad, you know. I asked him if everything was okay, and he said he couldn't talk about it. He hung out mostly alone. I ended up having him in my summer school class. He was late basically every day, and it resulted in him getting kicked out of the class. I, along with my classmates, could tell that something was eating at him. And him getting kicked out of the class honestly broke my heart because he looked so sad walking out. Rest in peace, George Hang. You will be missed. The next comment said, I had the pleasure of meeting George about 2 years ago in school. I remember being a little awkward at the time and asking random questions about him just to make small talk. Regardless, George was so friendly and never seemed put off by my questions. I saw him often during passing periods and noticed he was always the first one to come to class and the first one to hold the door open for others. He would have been a senior this school year. An amazing, inspiring senior he would have been. Rest in peace, George. Thank you for everything. And the last comment read, Rest in peace, George. You will always be missed. Class of 2016. So dreamers, now we know that George was more than the portrait his mother painted of him. The one of a violent, angry, hostile, potential mass killer in the making, who was failing out of school, breaking stuff at home, destroying their garden, and seemingly obsessed with killers. The Aurora, Colorado movie theater killer, the Isla Vista killer, the Sandy Hook killer, and then the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church killer. Maybe he was just angry at his mom. And that's not unusual for a teenager, because George's friends painted a very different picture of him as a nice but troubled yet polite young man who is greatly missed. It gives me pause, and it makes me wonder if it was more likely that he would have thrived in life once his mom was gone. If he would work through his grief and then was free of what his friends seemed to have been burdening him. Because nobody came onto these comments and said, yeah, he totally seemed like that kid that you were sure would show up to school one day with a gun and open fire. Nobody thought that, except for his own mother, the only person who actually showed up with a gun and opened fire. And that will bring this 160th episode of California Dreaming to a close. I would encourage you to come over to our Facebook group, and if you haven't done so yet, request to join. It's where we discuss the cases we cover. We share our thoughts and opinions not only about our show, but any other podcasts that you listen to, documentaries you've watched, books that you've read, as well as current news stories, Florida men and women, posts about funny memes. Just come over and share whatever. You can also go over to the show's Facebook page and like that page and leave a review or a recommendation. You can follow us on Twitter at CaliforniaPod and Instagram at CaliforniaDreamingPod. California Dreaming is brought to you by the Orbital Jigsaw Network, a podcast production company on a mission to create some of the best podcasts to listen to, with an eclectic roster of shows with content including true crime, history, sports entertainment, gaming, and social media. So visit our website at www.orbitaljigsaw.com. You'll find the links to all of those podcasts, as well as a link to our merchandise store on TeePublic. Again, that's www.orbitaljigsaw.com. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Roseanne. Until next time, sweet dreams.
Hi everyone, I'm Fern from Evidence of a Crime, a true crime podcast. I use extensive research to respectfully tell the stories of missing people, unsolved, cold cases, murder cases, and more from around the world. I've covered well-known cases such as Jacob Wetterling, an 11-year-old boy who disappeared in the USA, but mostly cover lesser-known cases such as the disappearance of Ruth Wilson, the murder of Carl Bridgewater, and the double murder of Monica and Dominique Frome. You can listen to Evidence of a Crime on all podcast platforms, or search Evidence of a Crime to find me on social media.